Dear students, in the last class we studied about colloids. What are colloids and what are the different types of colloids? So colloids are the heterogeneous system where one substance called dispersed phase is dispersed as very fine particles in another substance called dispersion medium. And based on the different criteria, there are different types of colloids. It is based on the physical states of dispersed phase and dispersion medium. There are 8 types of colloids, and based on the nature of interaction between dispersed phase and dispersion medium, there are 2 types of colloids, lyophilic colloids and lyophobic colloids. And based on the nature of particles present in dispersed phase, there are 3 types. It is a multimolecular, macromolecular and associated colloids, right? Now let us see how these colloids are prepared. So we can find many colloids around us, and you can prepare it artificially also. So there are different types of methods of preparation of colloids. The first one is chemical methods. So by chemical reactions like double decomposition, oxidation, reduction and hydrolysis, we can prepare many type of colloids. I will give one example. The reaction between arsenic oxide As2O3 plus H2S. The reaction is double decomposition reaction where AS combines with arsenic combines with sulfur and hydrogen and oxygen combines with each other to give water. Here the sol formed is arsenic sulfide As2S3. This is a sol formed. So this is one example of preparation of colloid by chemical process, that the reaction is double decomposition reaction. Similarly, there are examples of oxidation reactions, reduction reactions and hydrolysis reaction based on which we can prepare different types of colloids. So in the double decomposition reaction, arsenic oxide reacts with hydrogen sulfide and it gives arsenic sulfide sol, right? And the second important method of preparation of colloid is Brady's arc method. It is called electrical disintegration method or Brady's arc method. So in Brady's arc method, we can prepare the colloidal sol of metals like gold, silver or copper. So Brady's arc method, we can explain the Brady's arc method like this. Here an electric arc is struck between 2 metal electrodes. These are the metal electrodes of sol to be prepared. If you want to prepare the gold sol, we have to take gold electrode here. If you want to prepare copper sol, we have to take copper electrode here, and that electrodes are struck between an electric arc, and that electric arc is dispersed in a dispersion medium, suitable dispersion medium. So this is dispersion medium, and that instrument is placed in an ice bath. This is placed in an ice bath. So on passing electric current, the electric arc gets heated. On passing electric current, the electric arc gets heated and that vaporizes the metal which is in contact with that, and that metal gets vaporizes, and due to the presence of the ice bath present around it, it suddenly condenses back into the dispersion medium. Whatever the vapors are formed, it condenses back into the colloidal dispersion medium to form colloidal particles. So this process involves both vaporization and condensation. The electrode of the metal to be prepared as a sol is taken as electrode, and that electrodes are struck between an electric arc, and that is dispersed in it is placed in a dispersion medium, suitable dispersion medium, and the entire setup is placed in an ice bath. On passing electric current, the arc gets heated, right? And that vaporizes the metal, and because of the presence of ice bath, that vapors are immediately condensed back into the dispersion medium as colloidal particles. So this is a Brady's arc method to prepare sols like copper, gold or silver, and this is also called electrical disintegration method. So that is the second type of preparation of colloids, just write this diagram. So don't forget to write the electric arc here. This is important because the name itself is Brady's arc method. And note the electrodes here: an electric arc, dispersion medium and ice bath. And the third type of preparation of colloid is peptization. So in peptization, the freshly prepared precipitate is converted into colloidal salt by adding a suitable electrolyte. In peptization, freshly prepared precipitate is converted into colloidal salt by adding a suitable electrolyte, and that electrolyte added is called peptizing agent. For example, in the precipitate of ferric hydroxide, imagine this is the freshly prepared precipitate of ferric hydroxide. To this, if a small amount of ferric chloride is added, to the freshly prepared precipitate of ferric hydroxide, if a small amount of ferric chloride is added, this precipitate absorbs one of the ion present in the electrolyte, which is common, that is here ferric hydroxide, and we are adding ferric chloride. The common ion is Fe3 plus ion, and that Fe3 plus ions are absorbed on the surface of the ferric hydroxide precipitate. And the adsorbed ion must be common, means it should be present in the electrolyte as well as in the precipitate. So once the ions are adsorbed on the surface of precipitate, that precipitate breaks down into number of particles having size in the colloidal range. As you know, the like charges repel each other. Because of that repulsion, this precipitate breaks down into particles of colloidal range. It dissociates into number of particles having size in the colloidal range. The size of this entire precipitate is large, but when it dissociates, it forms size in the colloidal range. So this is about peptization. Peptization is a process of converting freshly prepared precipitate into colloidal particle by adding a suitable electrolyte, and that electrolyte is called peptizing agent. This is one of the example for peptization. To the freshly prepared precipitate of ferric hydroxide, if a small amount of ferric chloride is added, the ferric hydroxide precipitate preferentially absorb one of the ion present in the electrolyte, and as like charges repel each other, the precipitate breaks down into number of particles having size in the colloidal range. This is how we can prepare colloidal salt from the freshly prepared precipitate, that is called peptization. So these are the three methods of preparation of colloids: chemical methods, Brady's arc method and peptization. Here the important one is Brady's arc method and also definition for peptization. Next is a prepared colloid may contain excess of electrolyte or any other impurities like smaller ions or molecules. So though the small amount of electrolyte is necessary to stabilize the colloidal salt, excess of electrolyte may lead to its coagulation or precipitation of colloidal salt. Therefore, it is necessary to remove the excess of electrolyte present in the colloidal salt. So, that process is called purification of colloid. So, purification means the process of reducing the impurities present in the electrolyte to required level. That process is called purification of colloid. Removing or reducing the impurities of electrolyte to the required level. That process is called purification. So, there are two important types of purification methods, dialysis and ultrafiltration. So, in dialysis, small ions or molecules can be removed. Parchment membrane or animal membrane or cellophane, these are permeable to ions and molecules, but they are impermeable to colloidal particles. So, ions and molecules have smaller size, where the colloidal particles have slightly bigger size. So, animal membrane or parchment membrane, they are permeable to ions and molecules, but they are not permeable to colloidal particles. So, that principle is used in this dialysis process. A bag of parchment membrane, see here, this is the dialyzer. The instrument used for in dialysis is called dialyzer. So, this is a bag of parchment membrane. So, this is the parchment membrane or animal membrane in which the colloidal salt is taken, impure colloidal salt is taken, and then it is placed in the vessel containing water through which continuous water is flowing. Right? So, when it is washed with water continuously, the small ions and molecules comes out of this colloidal salt through this parchment membrane or animal membrane, whereas the colloidal particles are left behind in this inside the bag. A simple procedure, dialysis, the instrument is called dialyzer. Bag is made up of parchment membrane or animal membrane in which the impure colloidal salt is taken. It contains small ions or molecules and also some amount of electrolyte, and the small ions and molecules can pass through that animal membrane, but the colloidal particles cannot pass through it. And this bag is placed in the vessel containing water through which continuous flow of water is passed. So, on passing water, the ions and small ions and molecules comes out of this bag, and whatever the water comes out of that bag contains water and excess of electrolyte, and that all the impurities are removed and only the colloidal particles are left in the bag. So, this is one of the method of purification of colloidal salt. And the second method is ultrafiltration. In ultrafiltration, a special filter paper is used, and that is called ultrafilter paper. Ordinary filter paper is permeable to colloidal particles and small ions and molecules. Everything goes on from the ordinary filter paper because of its large pore size. But if we reduce the pore size of the filter paper, we can use it as a ultrafilter paper. To reduce the pore size of the ordinary filter paper, that ordinary filter paper is dipped into a solution called collodion solution. The ordinary filter paper is dipped in the solution of collodion, means the collodion solution is 4% solution of nitrocellulose in the mixture of alcohol and ether. That mixture is called collodion solution. 4% solution of nitrocellulose along with the alcohol and ether. That mixture is called collodion mixture, and ordinary filter paper is dipped in it, collodion solution, remove it and hardened by using formaldehyde. Now the pore size gets reduced. Now that filter paper is called ultrafilter paper, and by using that ultrafilter paper, filter the colloidal salt, impure colloidal salt. Now the dispersion medium pass through the ultrafilter paper, whereas the dispersed phase particles are collected over the filter paper, ultrafilter paper. Now that whatever the particles left over particles, colloidal particles, is again mixed with the fresh dispersion medium, so that we can prepared colloidal sol is free from impurities. So ultrafiltration is carried out by using a filter paper called ultrafilter paper. Ordinary filter paper can be converted into ultrafilter paper by reducing the pore size of the filter paper by dipping it in collodion solution. It is a 4% solution of nitrocellulose in alcohol and ether. Then it is removed and it is hardened by using formaldehyde, dried it, and now the ultrafilter paper is ready. Now filter the colloidal sol through the ultrafilter paper. Dispersion medium pass through the filter paper and dispersed phase particles are left in the filter paper. Again that colloidal particles or dispersed phase particles are mixed with the fresh dispersion medium to get pure colloidal sol. So these are the three methods of purification of colloids. Now the properties, let us discuss about the properties of colloidal solution. There are different properties of colloidal solution like Tyndall effect, Brownian movement, charge on the colloidal particles, electrophoresis and precipitation or coagulation. So these are the different properties of colloidal solution. I will explain one by one. First is Tyndall effect. Tyndall effect means, I will explain with an example. So this experiment you can do it at home, but this should be carried out in a dark room. So take a true solution. True solution means when a salt or sugar dissolved in water, that solution is called true solution. And take another colloidal solution. Colloidal solution means we can take a dilute solution of milk as a colloidal solution. You can take the dilute solution of milk as a colloidal solution, and strong convergent beam of light is passed through this solution. Okay, strong convergent beam of light is passed through it, and when it is viewed at right angles to the direction of the passage of light, true solution appears perfectly dark, whereas the colloidal solution, the path of the light beam is illuminated as a bluish light. So in the true solution, the path is not observed, but in the case of colloidal solution, path of the light beam is observed, or it is illuminated as a bluish light. So this effect was first observed or studied in detail by Tyndall. First it was observed by Faraday and later it was studied in detail by Tyndall. Hence that effect is called Tyndall effect. Take a true solution and colloidal solution, and a convergent beam of light is passed through the true solution and colloidal solution. When it is observed at right angles to the direction of the beam of light, the true solution appears perfectly dark, whereas in the case of colloidal solution, the path of the beam of light is illuminated as a bluish light, or we can observe the path of the light through the colloidal solution. The reason for this is because of the scattering of light by colloidal particles. The colloidal particles, as the size of the colloidal particle is slightly bigger than that of the particles of true solution, that light particles scatters the light. Because of the scattering of light by colloidal particles, the path of the beam of light is visible. That scattering of light by colloidal particles is called Tyndall effect. We can also observe the Tyndall effect in a cinema hall while the projection of light is illuminated by the presence of dust particles present in the air. So that effect is called Tyndall effect. And because of the Tyndall effect, and Tyndall effect is observed only under two conditions, that is the size of the diameter of the particle must not be very small compared to the wavelength of the light used. It is the particle size should not be very small compared to the wavelength of the light used, and there must be large difference in the refractive indices of dispersed phase and dispersion medium. Under these two conditions only we can observe the Tyndall effect. And when this observation is made by using an ultra microscope, if you did the same experiment and if we observe by using a ultra microscope, we can observe that colloidal particles looks like a bright stars in the dark background. We can observe the bright stars of colloidal particles in the dark background. That is also the scattering of light by colloidal particles. And remember that bright stars are not actually the colloidal particles, they are the light scattered by the colloidal particles. And by that experiment we can count the number of colloidal particles, and by knowing the volume of the solution we can also find the number of particles per unit volume, and from that we can also find out the average mass of the colloidal particles. And from the Tyndall effect it is also confirm the heterogeneous nature of the colloidal solution. So these are some of the applications of colloidal solution. We can confirm the heterogeneous nature of the colloidal solution by Tyndall effect. So Tyndall effect is a scattering of light by colloidal particles, and the formed cone is also called Tyndall cone. So that is about the first property of the colloids, that is Tyndall effect. And next is the Brownian movement. Again, when the colloidal solution is viewed under high power ultra microscope, we can observe that the particles are in a continuous zigzag motion. The dispersed phase particles are in a continuous zigzag motion. So this continuous zigzag motion was first studied by British botanist Robert Brown, hence it is named as Brownian movement. The reason for this Brownian movement is the unbalanced bombardment of the particles of the dispersed phase and dispersion medium. Because of the unbalanced bombardment of the particles of the dispersed phase and dispersion medium, the particles of the dispersed phase are in a continuous zigzag movement. Hence it is called, and that movement is called Brownian movement. And this Brownian movement is independent of the nature of the colloidal particles, but it depends on the size and viscosity, size of the particle and viscosity of the dispersion medium. The Brownian moment is independent of the nature of dispersed phase particle, but it depends on the size of the colloidal particles and viscosity of the dispersion medium. Smaller the size of the colloidal particles and lesser the viscosity, faster is the Brownian moment. And this Brownian moment gives stirring effect to the colloidal sol, and that does not allow the colloidal particles to settle down. Hence, it is one of the reason for the stability of the colloidal solution. So, Brownian moment gives stirring effect to the colloidal sol, and it does not allow the colloidal particle to settle down. Hence, it is the reason for the stability of the colloidal sol. And next important property of colloid is charge on the colloidal particles. Every colloidal particle has some charge, either positive charge or negative charge, and charge on the colloidal particle is same throughout the that given sol, either positive or negative, right? And some examples for positively charged colloidal sol are aluminum oxide, iron oxide and chromium oxide are some examples for positively charged sols. So these are the some of the positively charged colloidal salts: aluminum oxide, ferric oxide. You can also write chromium oxide, CrO3, XH2, and blood hemoglobin. It is a positively charged colloidal salt where the red blood cell, white blood cell, and platelets are dispersed in blood plasma. So these are examples for positively charged colloidal salt, and negative charged colloidal salts are gold salt, copper salt or silver salt, and colloidal solution of starch, gum, rubber, etc. are the negatively charged colloidal salts. So every colloidal particle has some charge. Now the reason for the charge on the colloidal particle is one of the most accepted reason is the preferential adsorption of ions. As I explained in peptidization method, a freshly prepared precipitate can adsorb one of the ions from the electrolyte. Hence, it dissociates into number of particles having size in the colloidal range, right? And in that case, it gains positive charge, and that becomes the positively charged sol. And that is one of the most accepted reason for the charge on the colloidal particle, that is because of the preferential adsorption of ions. I will explain with example. Now, if this is a silver nitrate solution AgNO3, to this if a small amount of potassium iodide is added, to the silver nitrate solution, if potassium iodide is added, AgNO3 plus Ki, because of the double decomposition reaction, silver combines with iodine and potassium combines with nitrate, and it gives silver iodide Agi plus KNO3, potassium nitrate, right? Now this silver iodide precipitate Agi, silver iodide precipitate, if you add potassium iodide in slight excess, this silver iodide can adsorb one of the ion from the potassium iodide. Now here the common ion is iodide. I minus is the common ion, that is, it is present in precipitate as well as in the electrolyte, and this silver iodide adsorbed I minus ion. It adsorbs I minus ion from the solution, hence it becomes a negatively charged sol particle. It becomes a negatively charged sol particle. Or in other words, if to the solution of potassium iodide, if silver nitrate is added, AgNO3, to the solution of potassium iodide, if silver nitrate is added, again the precipitate formed is Agi, silver iodide, right? Now if silver nitrate is added in slight excess, then this silver iodide adsorbed Ag plus ions present in the electrolyte. Now if it absorbs Ag plus ion, it becomes positively charged salt, right. So by absorbing one of the ion present in the electrolyte, a salt particle can be positively charged or negatively charged. If you add potassium iodide to the silver nitrate solution, silver iodide gets precipitated, and that silver iodide adsorbed I minus ion from the electrolyte, because it is added in slight excess, therefore it adsorbed I minus ion from the precipitate, hence it becomes a negatively charged salt particle. But if silver nitrate solution is added to potassium iodide, again silver iodide get precipitate, but it adsorbed Ag plus ion, because it is added in excess, so Ag plus ion get adsorbed on the precipitate of AgI, hence it becomes a positively charged salt. So depending on the nature of the ion get adsorbed on the surface of the precipitate, a positive charged ion or negatively charged ion salts can be are formed, right. And now this adsorbed charge can attract the counter ion present in the dispersion medium. So I minus can attract K plus ion, and Ag plus ion again attract I minus around it, right. So AgI, if it is a negatively charged ion, and there are a layer of negatively charged ions around silver iodide, and this I minus ions attract K plus ions present in the solution. It attracts the K plus ions present in the solution, or AgI, if it is positively charged Ag plus, it attracts I minus ions present in the solution, right. So the formation of two electrical double layer is called Helmholtz electrical double layer. The formation of electrical double layer is called Helmholtz electrical double layer, and because of the charge difference between the two, it exhibits some potential that is called zeta potential or electrokinetic potential. It is called zeta potential or electrokinetic potential. So whatever the charge is formed on the surface of the colloidal particle can attract the counter ions present in the dispersion medium, hence it forms second layer of charge. The first layer of charge is fixed, hence it is called fixed layer, and the second layer is mobile, hence it is called diffused layer. The first layer is fixed layer, second layer is diffused layer. So this electrical double layer is called Helmholtz electrical double layer, and the potential developed here is called zeta potential or electrokinetic potential. So this is about the charge on the colloidal particles. The charge on the colloidal particles is mainly because of the adsorption of ions present in the electrolyte. By the preferential adsorption of ions present in the electrolyte, it may be positive ion or negative ion. Depending on that, it is considered as a positively charged salt or negatively charged salt. And the charge on the colloidal particle is further confirmed by the experiment called electrophoresis. Charge on the colloidal particle is confirmed by electrophoresis. So this is a electrophoresis experiment. So here in a U tube, a colloidal salt is taken, and to that two platinum electrodes are connected to the positive terminal and negative terminal, and this is a colloidal salt. So electrophoresis experiment confirms the presence of charge on colloidal particle. So on passing electric current, if the colloidal sol is positively charged, it moves towards the negative electrode, or if it is a negatively charged sol, it moves towards the positive electrode. So here anode is positively charged and cathode is negative charged. The colloidal sol is negatively charged. So on passing electric current, it moves towards the anode or positive electrode, and there it gets discharged. So this is called electrophoresis experiment. Electrophoresis is movement of colloidal particles under the influence of electric field. That process is called electrophoresis. The movement of colloidal particles under the influence of electric field is called electrophoresis. Definition is important. Definition of electrophoresis: the movement of colloidal particles under the influence of electric field. Next, last property of colloidal particle is precipitation or coagulation. Precipitation of coagulation means the stability of lithophobic colloids is because of the charge present on the colloidal particles. If you remove the charge, the different colloidal particles come closer to each other and they settles down in the form of precipitate. Because of the charge, the colloidal particles are spread all over the dispersion medium. If you remove that charge, the colloidal particles come close to each other and they settles, right? So that process is called precipitation. Precipitation or coagulation. Removal of charge can cause the precipitation of colloidal particles. So how we can remove the charge on colloidal particles? Simple types are by boiling. By boiling, we can the fixed layer of charge on the colloidal particle disturbs, hence it leads to the coagulation of colloidal particles. Or by electrophoresis, as during electrophoresis, the positively charged sol particles move towards the negative electrode and negatively charged sol particles move towards the positive charge. On prolonged electrophoresis, they lose their charge and they discharge at respective electrodes. So during electrophoresis also, we can cause the coagulation of colloidal particles. And prolonged dialysis. So dialysis means removal of the ions or molecules or excess of electrolyte present in the colloidal sol by washing it with the flow of water, right? If you remove the last traces of electrolyte from the colloidal sol, that also causes the precipitation of colloidal sol. So prolonged dialysis also leads to coagulation. Precipitation either by boiling or by electrophoresis or by prolonged dialysis, and the important we can also cause the coagulation by mixing the two oppositely charged sols, positive charge and negative charge. If you mix the two, there is a neutralization of charges and that leads to the coagulation of colloidal sol. And one of the most important type of coagulation is by adding excess of electrolyte. On adding excess of electrolyte, the precipitate adsorb one of the ions present in the electrolyte or counter ion present in the electrolyte, and that leads to coagulation. By adding excess of electrolyte, the charge on the colloid particle attracts the counter ion present in the electrolyte, and that leads to coagulation. For example, positively charged sol can be coagulated by adding a negative ion, or a negatively charged sol is coagulated by adding a positive ion. The ion responsible for the coagulation is called coagulating ion. A negative ion can cause the coagulation of a positive sol, or a positive ion can cause the coagulation of a negative sol. That ion responsible for the coagulation is called coagulating ion. For example, to precipitate a negative sol, we have to add a positive ion, right? Now, suppose if there are three positive ions like aluminium, barium and sodium, Al3 plus, Ba2 plus and Na plus. For the coagulation of a given amount of negatively charged salt, small amount of aluminum is required, whereas a large amount of Na plus is required. That means that higher the valency of coagulating ion added, more is its coagulating power. Higher the valency of coagulating ion added, more is its coagulating power. Means to coagulate a given volume of negatively charged salt, we required small amount of aluminum 3 plus, because its valence is 3 plus and its coagulating power is more than that of Ba2 plus or Na plus. Its valence is less. So this is the coagulating power of Al3 plus, Ba2 plus and Na plus. So less amount of Al3 plus is required, whereas a more amount of Na plus is required to coagulate a negatively charged salt. And if you want to coagulate a positively charged salt by adding a negative ion, we can write the order like this. Cl minus. Ferricyanide ion, a complex ion, phosphate ion with a valency 3 minus, sulfate ion with a valency 2 minus, and a chloride ion with a valency minus. A small amount of complex ion is needed, whereas a large amount of chloride ion is needed to cause the precipitation of a positively charged salt. So this observation is called Hardy-Schill's rule. This observation is called Hardy-Schill's rule. Means higher the valency of coagulating ion, more is the power to cause precipitation. So this is one of the important method to cause the precipitation of a salt. So different methods of precipitation of colloidal salt are either by boiling or by electrophoresis or prolonged dialysis or by mixing oppositely charged salts or by adding electrolytes. So in that adding electrolytes we come Hardy-Schill's rule. Hardy-Schill's rule means higher the valency of coagulating ion, more is its power to cause precipitation. So these are the different types of coagulation methods. So this is about the properties of colloids: Tyndall effect, Brownian moment, charge on the colloidal particles, electrophoresis and precipitation or coagulation. Tyndall effect means scattering of light by colloidal particles. Scattering of light by colloidal particles is called Tyndall effect. Brownian movement, the continuous zigzag motion of the particles of the dispersed phase is called Brownian moment. The charge on the colloidal particles is because of the adsorption of the charge from the electrolyte. Electrophoresis means the movement of colloidal particles under the influence of electric field is called electrophoresis. Precipitation or coagulation means on removing the charge present on the colloidal particle, the different colloidal particles come close to each other and again they form precipitate, and that is called precipitation or coagulation. So these are the important properties of colloids. And in application of colloids, we find many applications of colloid. For example, in the Cottrell precipitator of smoke. The smoke is a colloidal solution of carbon, arsenic compounds or dust. When it is whatever the smoke comes out of the chimney of any industry, when that smoke is allowed to pass through a chamber containing electric plates which is carrying charge opposite to that of the charge present on the smoke, that smoke particles get attracted towards that plates, electric plates, and there they lose their charge and they are collected in the form of ash. That is called electrical precipitation of smoke. That is important because the smoke or arsenic compounds are the main pollutants, right? So we have to remove the charge particle present on the smoke particles by electrical precipitator. And in medicine also we find many applications of colloid. For example, eye lotion. one of the eye lotion, that is Argyrol. It is a colloidal solution of silver which is used in eye lotion, and colloidal antimony is used for the treatment of Kala Azar, and milk of magnesia is also one of the colloidal solution. It is used in the stomach disorders. So colloidal solutions are very useful as medicines because of their large surface area. They are effective medicines because of the large surface area. And also one of the important application is in the purification of water. Water obtained from any natural source, it contains suspended impurities. Suspended impurities means it is not completely soluble in water, but it is present as a minute particle which cannot be separated by filtration. To that, if a potash alum or a double salt is added, all the suspended impurities are settles down, and we can easily separate it by filtration. And this is an important application of colloids. The suspended impurities present in the water can be removed by adding alum or a double salt of potassium, that is the composition potassium sulfate, aluminium sulfate. It causes the precipitation of suspended impurities, and that converts the water fit to drink. These are the three applications of colloids: in the electrical precipitation of smoke, in the purification of water, and in medicines. So by this, that completes about the colloids. Next, another important type of colloidal sol is emulsions. So emulsions means dispersed phase and dispersion medium, both are liquids. One liquid is dispersed in another liquid. That type of colloidal sol is called emulsions. There are two types of emulsions. First is oil dispersed in water. It is called oil in water type, and water dispersed in oil is water dispersed in oil type. So emulsions are of two types: oil dispersed in water, and second one is water dispersed in oil type. In the first type, oil dispersed in water, the dispersion medium is water. The dispersion medium is water. In that, some oil particles are dispersed. Dispersion medium is water, in that some oil particles are dispersed. So example is milk. Milk is a emulsion of the type oil dispersed in water, where liquid fat is dispersed in water. Liquid fat is dispersed in water. And next is water dispersed in oil, means here the dispersion medium is oil. Dispersion medium is oil. In that, some water droplets are dispersed. Dispersion medium is oil, and some water droplets are dispersed as dispersed phase. Example is butter. Butter is an example for water dispersed in oil type. Right? The maximum content is oil and the minimum content is water. So these are the two types of emulsions: oil dispersed in water and water dispersed in oil type. Usually the emulsions are quite unstable. If you leave it for a long time, the two layers are formed of dispersed phase and dispersion medium. So in order to stabilize the emulsions, we need this emulsifying agent. Right? Important one: examples for oil dispersed in water type or water dispersed in oil type. Milk and butter. Milk is example for oil dispersed in water type, and butter is an example for water dispersed in oil type. So in the whole chapter we studied about adsorption, absorption, difference between adsorption and absorption, mechanism of adsorption, types of adsorption, physical adsorption and chemical adsorption, and catalysis, homogeneous catalysis and heterogeneous catalysis, enzyme catalysis, mechanism of heterogeneous catalysis and enzyme catalysis, and characteristics of enzyme catalysis. And the last part is colloids. In colloids, classification of colloids, preparation of colloids, purification of colloids and properties of colloids, right? And in the small part about emulsions we studied. So that's about the chapter, and I hope you understand well, and if you have any doubt you can write it in comments. Thank you.